Up next on the Parth and Pratham show.
Because when we return to school and when we return to full expectations, what we have done in this time will matter. And so we're not going to completely relax those expectations. We're not going to completely get rid of those standards because you need them in order to be successful when we return. But to understand that sometimes we need to meet them in different ways, and sometimes we need more support in order to be able to do that.
It's the Parth and Pratham show.
Mental health and the coronavirus, Parth. That is the big idea people have been talking about. It has always been a problem, especially among adolescents. According to a survey from Time magazine in 2019, 61% of Americans felt lonely in some way. COVID-19 sheltering in place has made it worse.
And a side effect to shelter in place has been loneliness. Schools have shut down and students have not been able to even visit their friends. But it's not just students, Pratham. Young adults who have work have also been feeling more lonely because their workplaces have shut down. According to the same Time study, on average, 31% of Americans feel more lonely thanks to coronavirus.
And the age cohort with the highest percentage of a loneliness attributed to the pandemic is men, between the age of 24 and 39 at 36%, and then women come in second place at 24 to 39, between ages 24 to 39 at 31%. No one is feeling right now, and we need to support each other.
To discuss the resources available to help people who have mental health problems during this coronavirus, please welcome a psychologist who helps support students at Dublin High School. She runs the newly opened Wellness Center. Please welcome Dr. Sarah Munoz. Thank you so much for being on our show. So, hi Sarah, tell us about your personal life. Where did you go to high school or college, and what did you major in?
So I went to high school in a super rural area in Southern California, a place called Hemet. I was pretty strong academically, thankfully, but also super motivated to be able to go to college at a time when most of my peers did not go to college. And so I worked really hard to be able to get into UCLA, and was able to go to UCLA, which is an amazing experience, especially educationally. Really expanded my boundaries, helped me learn things that I never had exposure to before. Got to take really crazy classes like evolutionary anthropology, African art, statistics, and psychology as well. And in my second quarter as a freshman student at UCLA, I took an intro to psychology class. I have a bachelor's of science in psychology, and I went to immediately following my bachelor's degree, I went to Hofstra University on Long Island, New York, and worked to get a doctorate degree in school and community psychology.
So, what is your specialization in psychology? Is it like a specific subject you find the most interesting or aspect of it?
Adolescent psychology, just because I work both in a school and a clinical setting. And with the school experience comes a lot of developmental psychology studies and research and experience. And so I think that probably working with adolescents would be what I'm most experienced in.
So you talked about how you worked in a school and you worked with adolescents, right? And so what is the role of specifically a school psychologist? Because I think they might have some different responsibilities as compared to someone who works in like marital affairs or something like that.
The primary part of my responsibility within the schools is identifying students with impediments to learning and talking about supporting and developing plans to help them access the ability to learn. I think at a large public high school, which is where I am currently set, there's also a good bit of general mental health support in terms of I work very closely with admin because they're pretty awesome and they care about students' mental health. Work pretty closely with them to talk about issues that affect the mental health of all students. And when I'm able to, I help them devise plans and services that help support all students so that they don't become at risk, so that they don't need direct intervention later on.
So you're almost like a warning track to prevent maybe things from making it worse and maybe hopefully like make a U-turn and make it better and intervene quickly. So yeah, you said admin, you work really closely with admin and you they do a great job, I agree. They helped this year, in 2019 school year, create something called the Wellness Center, correct? Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that?
And so for at least 10 years, but I actually think closer to 20, our administration has been working very, very hard on being able to secure the funding for a wellness center. And a wellness center, which finally opened this year, a wellness center is a place that students can go to be able to receive in-person, on-time, immediate access to counseling services, food, if necessary, a place to just sit and reduce simulation, work on coping and soothing, a place that students can access to be able to feel safe.
So let's pivot to like teenagers and teenage health because me and Pratham were high schoolers, right? And we see a lot of people around us going through the same problems. So as a psychologist, we want to ask you, what are the most common mental health issues that teenagers face and where do they like stem from?
And so as you're developing this sense of self, who you want to be, who you're going to become, we also don't yet have full ability to be able to become that person right away. We still very much have to adhere to guidelines in high school, guidelines of parents, things like that, right? And so just internally, this creates a good bit of conflict, I think, within the home and within the school environment in terms of I want to do this, but I can't do this. Definitely creates conflict. Definitely creates the stress. But then going back to that developmental piece, hormones are all over the place, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Abilities to establish and maintain healthy and appropriate social relationships aren't fully there yet because we're still all just experimenting, figuring out how to relate to others in ways that are successful and make everybody happy. Just not sure how to achieve a win-win all the way just yet. Um, all of that is to say that adolescence is a time of significant instability. It just is. And even the most stable of us experiences difficulties in changing expectations, changing environments, changing internal structures as they occur.
Do you think that there's any strategies or solutions to try to cope up with these problems? Because many of the problems you talked about were more like age related, right? That like might go away when you mature and get older. But say problems like anxiety or depression, are there anything that you can do? Is there anything you can do to cope up with them?
Hmm. And so I'll clarify. Some of these problems are created by age and a lack of control over like our everyday lives because of our age, right? And so we can't set the you can't set the standards in high school. You simply have to adhere to them. You can't set the rules and guidelines within your family. You simply have to adhere to them, right? And so some of this conflict comes from that. But without solid coping skills, adaptive coping skills that support wellness and adaptive decision making, those concerns can continue long after you're an adolescent. And those include anxiety and depression. The research shows that if you have your first major depressive episode as an adolescent, you have more likelihood of developing one as an adult as well, rather than if you'd simply had it as an adult, right? And so this is an important period in development, a difficult period in development because of those identity issues, but an important period of development in which to be able to offer support and training in the use of coping and communication skills. Because what happens during this period of time can continue on sometimes for the rest of your life.
So during the self quarantine, do you think what, like maybe just in general psychology and maybe specifically adolescent psychology, what trends are you seeing between people who are experiencing isolation?
And so March 13th, March 14th, we found out that we were not returning to school on the following Monday. 3 days, right, was what we had in order to be able to prepare for a completely new everyday reality. That's not a lot. And that's not hating or blaming. That's the condition of this country, right? That's how fast things move. That's how fast those decisions were made. Um, and so nobody had the chance to plan, prep, or prepare for what our new everyday lives would look like. And so most people struggled for a while following that decision, following that need to shelter in place. It's not abnormal. It's actually very normal to experience at least some short term grief about leaving an old life behind and starting a brand new type of life. Not that we can't return, right? But that's what happened. We left an old life and we started a new one. Very normal to struggle. What happens though over time is if we don't adapt and set those routines, develop those coping skills, then we start to really experience lasting stress.
So these feelings of on the track of not coping, do you think the symptoms that these people are having, are they long lasting? And if so, like how long lasting are they? Like what's the long lasting mental and psychological impact of COVID-19?
And so I think that everybody, in times like extreme crisis, I think that everybody does the best that they can. But some are able to cope and become adaptive, and some are not. And in those situations, those that continue to struggle after a long period of time, and that struggle intensifies, the symptoms that they see intensify, the difficulty that they have in finding their feet again significantly increases, those those people, those students, those adults, they need support. And those that get support oftentimes are able to, even if it takes them longer, are able to become adaptive in the face of our current reality. Um, my concern is those that don't access the right level of support and what that might mean for them. Because without support, if you're in distress, it is really, really hard to be able to become adaptive, move on, develop the structures and systems and processes that you need in order to become adaptive again, to become well. Some people will forever remember the day that we went into shelter in place as the day that their lives changed and not for the better. Some people will simply have regrets and sadness and distress, but be able to move on with their lives on their own timeline, depending on the support that they have. And so I wish I had a concrete answer for you, but I don't, because it's so highly dependent upon who we all are as individuals, which is unique.
Let's talk about academic rigor. So DHS,
Mhm.
very academic. We took a look at some of the stats for our audience. We have 156 students with a GPA between 4.0 and 4.7 in the senior graduating class. So that was about 1/5 of the 600 kid population. There were a total of 1,897 AP exams administered with an 87% pass rate. So academics matters a lot. And a lot of people take a lot of coursework. And this calls for a lot of late nights and early mornings, and many people don't get sleep. So how dangerous is having such a huge course load in both the short term and the long term?
I think that I would prefer that students and their families limited the amount of rigor that they were attempting to accomplish each year, because academic skills is incredibly important to being able to get into a good college, but life skills and coping skills are just as important. The hard part about that is that since I left California, graduating from a UC, to when I returned to California following graduate school in the early years of my career, it has gotten substantially harder to get into a 4-year college. Like a lot, like significant, not a little, a lot. And so it's a systematic issue now as opposed to a DHS issue that is occurring in many, many different areas. I think that DHS is very significantly impacted by it, though. And I worry about the hyper focus on academics and academic skills with very little time or ability to develop life and coping skills, because college is not just an academic environment. DHS is, right? You go home and you have a whole different set of social and environmental and familial kind of roles that await you. But DHS in and of itself is the academic environment. College is not the same. You live at college. You develop friends and relationships at college. You develop and maintain solid life skills and life choices at college. And you engage in academic academic pursuits. And without the skills in those areas, without the idea of balance in those areas and coping and adaptive life skills, you struggle.
Yeah. So the Dublin Unified School District has just announced that they plan to start off the school year with 6 weeks of distance learning again, right, from home. So do you support this? And how would the wellness center, as well as like if anyone needs psychological help during that time, how will they get help? And if you were the admin, would you push school back a little bit to give time for students to like cope
Adjust.
up?
Because from what I understand, this may not just be a 6-week more trial in terms of dealing with COVID. This could be a lot longer than that, maybe even until we have some kind of vaccine with real efficacy. And so then I feel like the policymakers are caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of, do we bring students back knowing that there are health and safety risks? Do we not bring students back knowing that this could potentially even be a year or more until we have a solid vaccine? Or do we have some kind of hybrid model where we limit exposure, but like recognize that we also can't be on school grounds all the time? Until yesterday was Friday. All the days blur together. Until yesterday, we didn't have clear guidance on what that should look like. And then Governor Newsom has really laid out super clear criteria in terms of what he feels does not put our health at risk. And Alameda County, because it's on the watch list, because our percentages put us on the watch list, we are not able to return to school until we have been off of the watch list for 14 consecutive days. Honest truth, I don't know when that will be. I don't know if that'll be within 6 weeks. I don't know if that will be within 6 months. There's so much that is undefined at this moment, which is hard. What's also hard is not being able to interact with your teachers, not being able to ask questions in the moment with your teachers, not being able to engage in learning in a consistent, stable, predictable environment like a school building. It's hard. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I'm trying to teach my 7-year-old how to read. That's hard. I'm not a reading teacher. I have so much respect for teachers. It's hard. I'm also doing that while trying to juggle the jobs that I have as well. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. And in a perfect world, should we be able to socially distance? Should we be able to get hygiene like correct and where it needs to be? I would love to be able to return to the school building, but I also know that almost every student has access to people who are high risk. Students may be high risk themselves. There's no answers. There is no right answer in a situation like this. There just isn't. And because there's no right answer, you can't please everybody. You can't ensure that everybody is going to be able to learn well. You can't ensure that everybody has access to the services and supports that they need in order to be healthy and well. Sorry, my kitty is making her appearance. I'm paying attention. You'll see her big old tail in just a second. We can't. It's not possible. And so I think that we do the best we can. We follow the guidelines that are laid out by the state and the county, and we hope that most, if not all, students are able to learn in some capacity, while recognizing that when we return to school, there will need to be changes to standards, to expectations, potentially to even requirements. And we do what we have to do to be flexible. I think we do what we have to do to be flexible, to make sure that students' wellness, their basic needs, including their emotional wellness, is taken care of. Because a student that is well, a student that has the amount of food that he or she needs, that has stable housing, that has access to supports and services that they need, will be able to learn. It's just that it may not happen in the current environment. It's hard. There are no answers. There are no right answers. There's only people making the best choices that they can right now, knowing that those choices may not, like in hindsight, when we look back, those choices may not have been the best choices to make. Those choices may not be the best choices moving forward. I think the people doing their best to make the best choices. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck, but I think that if we can acknowledge that we're in this together. Make sure that schools are providing the outreach in terms of meals and potentially mental health services that they need, that teachers are doing what they can to connect with their students, but also that they really truly understand the difficulties present in online learning for our students, and that they are making adaptive choices for their students about what the expectations should look like. That's important. I think that accessing community mental health services, if you can't from your school building, that's important. And so making sure that all students are aware that there's not just services available on campus, but that there are services within the community. And if they need them, they need to reach out and get them, helping them access them if they can't do that by themselves. All of those things are important, and all of those things will be included in the plan to return next month. I don't know about the effectiveness. I don't know about the access. Those are hard. It's hard questions to answer because I just don't know if there are answers in this moment.
So what would you think? What would you recommend to teachers, knowing maybe the emotional or the human side of kids? Like perhaps these teachers have been teaching for a long time, and it's a very just very straightforward course, as in this and this have to be done by a certain date. What would you say to teachers who have to ignore students' human needs in order to get the coursework done?
Right. That's a whole conversation, right? In terms of all of us are human beings, all of us are struggling right in this moment. And for those who don't have full autonomy and independence and choice over their own lives, I think that there's an aspect of struggling even more. I would encourage teachers to have the conversations with their students, to recognize that there is a lot that we are looking to face and cope with, and that at this period in time in your lives, we don't have fully developed brains. We don't until mid-20s. We don't have fully developed coping skills. We don't have fully developed communication skills. And so all of these things that we're asking you to do are hard, period. We may need more time. We may need fewer expectations. We may need more support. And so to have those conversations and help access any or all of the things that you need in order to be able to learn at least some. Because when we return to school and when we return to full expectations, what we have done in this time will matter. And so we're not going to completely relax those expectations. We're not going to completely get rid of those standards, because you need them in order to be successful when we return. But to understand that sometimes we need to meet them in different ways, and sometimes we need more support in order to be able to do that.
Okay, so just finally, do you have any good resources that you'd like to share with the audience if they're going through some sort of mental health crisis?
Mm-hmm. And so if you need support, contact your counselor, contact a teacher, contact your school psychologist, talk to your parents if you can have that conversation with them, talk to your friends, connect, reach out, try to access support. For community mental health, Psychology Today has a really great website for finding psychologists and therapists, as well as psychiatrists that go according to your insurance and are within your location, your physical location. If you need counseling support, reach out for it and try to access it. If you can't access it, contact your school. Talk to the friends you haven't heard from for a while. Make sure they're okay. Make sure that you're eating well, sleeping well, and that if you don't have a solid routine, establish a solid routine. And if you need help in doing that, ask somebody for help in doing that. I think the more that we communicate what we need in this moment, the better off we're all going to be. And it can be hard to say, I'm really struggling. This is hard for me. But it's okay. Because if we do that, somebody will take notice, somebody will care, and somebody will help you get the support that you need. And so the first step, I think, is communicating. The second step is research, right? Find out what it is that's going on with you. let's see, I can give you a couple good websites. Mayo Clinic has a great website. Very Well Mind has a great website. Helpguide.org has a great website. Those are solid, peer-reviewed websites that have solid resources. Do your research. Contact the people that you know that can care and can help you and support you, and access and achieve additional support if you feel like you need it. There's no shame in saying my life is completely different than it was in March. And I don't know how to make it look comfortable for me. I don't know how to make it feel better for me. It's okay to say that. We say it, and then we start making some changes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
That was a great conversation.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. And do you, yeah, thank you.